So today is Saturday, September 16th, 2023. Um, Interestingly, today on the Jewish religious calendar is Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year, but also the day in which traditionally we look at, remember the amazing reality of the creation of the world and our responsibilities to this created world as human beings. We also look at the reality of our death, that though this is a joyous time, we also should remember, and this is part of the tradition, impermanence. And that remembering that helps us to live wisely in the face of all the challenges of how to live well on this earth. If you know Leonard Cohen's songs, he has a song called Who by Fire, which is actually basically the text of a traditional prayer that's said at Rosh Hashanah. That is, how will you die? Because we're all going to die. Who by fire, who by water, who by slow decree, who by various, and it kind of goes through every possibility. So if you don't know that song, it's a terrific song. It's quite moving. These also open what's called the Days of Awe for the next 10 days, essentially, in which the gates between the human realm and the higher realms are open, and we have a chance to make good on things we always meant to do, or to repent for things that we did that we wish we hadn't done until the book of life is closed on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. So this is our opportunity where the gates between the realms are very thin. It's a spiritual energy time in general that's recognized by this tradition, by that tradition. And typically, Days of Awe really do have a kind of unusual feeling. As we shift into the autumn, there's a feeling of completion and possibility that happens at the same time. So what I'd like to do today is look at, we started with Dogen Fukan Zazengi last week, and before we go on to the Bendowa, which is the second piece he wrote after returning from China, I'd like to finish up now that, as of yesterday, after many almost theirs, the new book that I've been working, A Zen Life of Bodhisattva, working on, is finally, the text is completely finally done after many final edits, things that I felt weren't written well enough or clearly enough. So I'd like to continue what we were doing. I'm going to skip one chapter, and we have two chapters that are very short, which are the last two in the book, and those I'll read to you today. And we'll skip the chapter on Roshi Kapleau as an ordinary person working their best to be a bodhisattva, as we tend to read that piece at his memorial service that we do here. And also it's already on the Endless Path Zendo website. So this is on Zen and failure. Even if you're not familiar with Zen, you might be familiar with failure. So let's take a look at how these two things are intimately aligned. So this essay, Zen Failure, is based on a Dharma talk I originally gave at the Rochester Zen Center all the way back in 1990. It was later published in the Sun magazine and also reprinted in Progressions, Readings for Writers, published by Norton Company in 98. I've left things in it pretty much as it was written some 30 years ago, because I still find it relevant, and because it's thematically aligned with the way of the Bodhisattva, I've included it in the new book, Zen Life of Bodhisattva. So now a little bit on the book and how this connects. In an earlier chapter of A Zen Life of Bodhisattvas, we explored a koan in which Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, failed both to get close to the Buddha and to bring a young woman out of samadhi. Wumen's verse for that koan says that this failure was wonderful indeed. The failure was wonderful indeed. How about that? Anyway, a Buddhist legend also related earlier in this book says that Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion, gained the great power and skill of 1,000 arms and 11 heads through failure. It's not like he got better and better and better at what he was doing, being compassionate, and so he earned 11 heads and 1,000 arms so he could do much more. No, it came out of him failing dramatically. He made a vow to empty all the hells, and he had done it. After working for eons, the hells were empty, everything was nice and quiet again, and then an instant later, bam, all the hells were immediately filled. And in the face of that failure, his head burst into 11 heads, and his arms, 2 arms, burst into 1,000 arms. And now he could really get to work. So it was failure that brought about his maturing. Interesting. And in the section on the Buddha as the Bodhisattva, which is one of the sections in the new book, in the Jataka of the Naga king, the Nagas are like cobra beings that are very wise in many ways. The Buddha in a past life makes a mistake and fails. He's a poor man and he wants to get rich, and he becomes a Naga in his next life, very rich. But oops, he can't practice enlightenment as a Naga, and he realizes it's been a terrible mistake. And by correcting course, he comes to an even fuller commitment to his great vow to realize the Buddha way. This is the vow of the Bodhisattva. These are our 4 great vows, which we take at the end of all formal periods of Zazen. Through failure, his commitment to the path is matured and deepened. So, for many reasons, this is simply the way of things and is only natural. Failure is a necessary part of the Bodhisattva path because it is a necessary part of anyone's growing up. Whether a necessary aspect, we could say, in gaining any kind of skill, whether it's musical, artistic, athletic, on the job, whatever it is, you're going to fail because no one starts off where they want or hope to be. We see what's possible, and then from there it takes work to reach whatever goal we've set ourselves. And along the way, we're going to keep coming up short because we're not there yet. That's how we improve. So Zen Buddhist tradition says that to achieve full understanding and unlimited compassion, which Zen paradoxically says is already ours, it's just that we don't yet know it, it's going to require more than one lifetime's work, many failures. In fact, it's likely to take many lifetimes. So when Roshi Kapleau passed someone on an initial koan, he would point to the edge of the sitting mat and he would say, "Congratulations, you've gotten onto the very edge of the mat. Your journey all the way across the mat, a journey of lifetimes, now begins." So again, we should expect failures all along the way, each offering new opportunities to improve, mature in understanding, in ability, and in character. Because what was once good enough in time is outgrown and turns out to be not yet enough, is how Aitken Roshi used to present it. So the Bodhisattva suffers from divine discontent. Very traditional term, divine discontent. The failure is wonderful indeed. So here's the talk, Zen failure. Zen failure can mean many things. It could mean the failure of Zen. It could mean that someone is a failure in Zen. It could mean a Zen-like failure or the Zen of failure. All are implied. It's potentially a vast field, and in the short time we have, we'll only be able to touch the very tip of the iceberg of Zen failure. For many years practicing Zen, I thought I was a failure. But as more years went by, I began to realize that failure is the heart of Zen. In fact, failure is what Zen is about. Perhaps it's what life is about. Successes never seem to last, and death, after all, comes in the end to take all our successes away. So if you want something abiding, something for the long run, look to failure. There's a profundity to it. I don't mean giving up. I don't mean turning around and walking away. I mean the failure that we really have to work hard for. The failure you put everything into. Bitter failure. There's a kind of principle involved here which says that real failure requires real effort and is its own reward. There's a little poem by Yeats which came to me as I was thinking about this subject called The Four Ages of Man from Supernatural Songs. I'd like you to think about it in relation to failure as the essence of the spiritual life. It goes like this. He with body waged a fight, but body won. It walks upright. Then he struggled with the heart. Innocence and peace depart. Then he struggled with the mind. His proud heart he left behind. Now his wars on God begin. At stroke of midnight, God shall win. At stroke of midnight, God shall win. There it is, failure. The last defeat of all one's hopes, fears, stratagems, and efforts. The thing we fear, the ultimate defeat, the final failure is something that keeps me practicing. The growing recognition of the reality of death. At some point during the course of the winter and early spring of 1990, with Rose's mother's death and then 2 months later my own mother's passing, came the recognition that all our efforts will come to naught. Each of us will die. Everything we have gained, everything we've worked hard for, all of it will be taken from us. Everything will be lost, thoughts, feelings, the singing of birds, the cool wind on your skin on a hot day. All of these things, the sunrise and sunset, the people you love, all gone. And then you realize your children will be gone, the children that you worry about, that you hover over in your mind, day and night, gone. They're going to die, no matter how hard you work protecting them in this life. No matter how well they do as they grow up. And then you realize your grandchildren will die and your great-grandchildren will die. And that this has been going on since the very beginning. And it will go on as long as there's time. So underneath all our successes, perhaps even after a lifetime of successes, we still have to come face to face with this insurmountable failure. Yet it's interesting that in the Yeats poem we catch some glimmer that failure might not be as bad as we think. Would it be so bad if God won? And through that little doorway, that narrow path, narrow as a razor's edge, opened by that doubt, we come to Zen. Let me take a more mundane path, though, first. We're all failures, and that's why we're in Zen. Maybe spiritual life is failed worldly life, and here's a little something we can talk about later. Is lay life simply failed monastic life, or is it something else, something different? Whatever it is, it's something I think we'll all have to sort out in the years to come. In any case, I'd like to start with the mundane recognition that failure is a two-edged sword. There's the failure that prevents you from living fully, the failure built of fears and expectations, patterns to which mind and body have been long habituated. There's the failure that prevents you from hearing the birds singing, the failure to use the amazing and intricate senses of body and mind with which we've all been so lavishly endowed. There's the failure to get something we want. Perhaps that's the failure we know best. There's also the failure that tempts our will and tests our mettle, reveals our desires and values. And then there's the failure that's open and pure, the failure, if you will, that Zen is all about. I mean, what could be more ridiculous, after all, than working so hard? Sitting and sitting, session after session, letting go of hope upon hope, facing fear after fear, desire after desire, letting go of all of it, to find out, in the end, you have to fail completely. You have to die the great death, the death of ego attachment. You have to give up everything. You work so hard and now you have to die. Ultimate failure. And yet, that's where success in Zen can begin. As I said, we're all failures. We start off complete and whole. I'm thinking now of memories of early childhood. There's no lack there, no unfulfilled desires. But after a while, trained perhaps by the world we see around us, we discover that we want to be handsome or beautiful. We want to be always loved and respected. We want, too, to be independent and strong. Perhaps we'd like to be wise and certainly eternal, but somehow none of those things ever quite work out. It's not as we planned or hoped. And the failure becomes so bitter that we have to do something. Perhaps we hear about Zen. We begin practicing, and for many years it's like we're shooting at a target, but we keep missing. Failure after failure. But one day we find the failures are related to what seems to be success. Still, after having gained this, then what? How many of us can truly accept that Zen offers nothing? That too is another little failure perhaps we may encounter on the path. Anyway, through a number of failures, I came to Zen. Certainly the pain of those failures was bitter enough to drive me onto a completely different path, the path of actual practice, practice in which you put the books away and your knees hurt. And then, looking back over life and the things we've done since Rose and I have been here in Rochester, there was the wonderful, glorious failure of the Oxcart Bookshop, which for anyone who was here for it was something to be remembered. A great failure indeed. It took much effort to engineer that one. It all fell apart, and then, great surprise, something new emerged, even better than what had been. After the closing of the Oxcart, I had an idea for a book. It was a book that went deep into some very painful parts of my life. At one time, I lost everything, including my ordinary mind, and lived in backwoods Pennsylvania in redneck backwoods situations. There was an old quarry behind a hill, and I thought I could take a wish from my childhood, a wish that had never and could never come true, and combine it with some of the feelings I had had while walking through that quarry and make something new, as well as heal some old areas within myself. Anyway, for 3 years I worked on the story of a boy and the power of his imagination. For 3 years, and this was after I already had written what became a very successful children's book, my manuscript was turned down by my editor for 3 years. Failure after failure. Time and again. 100 rewrites on this one little story, turned down each time. Then suddenly I was about to bite the bullet on the story. I saw in one timeless instant how the whole thing could work. After 3 years of effort, 3 years of failure, in 30 seconds it was written. Voila! And the book became a success. That period of loss and pain from many years ago gave me the basis to create something now that worked well and pleased me greatly. How do you explain it? Is failure terrible? Can it be a good thing? One day when I was young, my father looked into my room where I was sitting on my bed drawing, and he said to me, "Don't become an artist." I worried about that for a long time. Could be a real mistake, could be a big failure, could mean loneliness, could be worse. Anyway, I failed to follow his advice and ended up in the arts after all. I had a talk with him a couple of years ago, well, he was still alive, obviously, as he was driving me to a performance I was giving north of New York City, and I said to him, the people I respected most when I was young were not really successes. I knew there was someone he and I both respected very much, and that was the painter Van Gogh. I'm going to pull this a little closer. Yeah. I said something like, Van Gogh never sold a single painting while he was alive, and he died in poverty and mental pain. And William Blake, who I revered, died in poverty too, but in great joy. And then there's Melville, who, after writing perhaps the greatest American novel and one of the greatest books in the world, got only terrible reviews and lived the rest of his life in obscurity and finally despair. These people seem to be failures. Then there are people who are successes. They may earn a lot of money. Maybe they make weapons. Maybe it's just some innocuous product that pollutes the environment a bit. I'm not putting money or success down. These are extreme examples to make a point. Anyway, they have money, take good vacations, wear nice clothes, and naturally, we think of them as successes. But the legacy they leave doesn't last long, and if it does, it's often something we don't want around anyway. But Van Gogh, Blake, Melville, their works just get stronger and stronger. How do you explain this? What is a success anyway? What is a failure? Let me tell you a little story from ancient China, Taoist tale called The Green Pillow Dream. It was turned into a no play in Japan, was changed a lot, but the essence of the story simply goes like this. Once there was a person who was dissatisfied with his life. He was a farmer, so he set out on the road to seek his fortune. He walked for a day and got hungry. He came to an inn nestled in the foothills of the mountains. He didn't have much money, but when he went in, he ordered a bowl of rice and some tea. And he was very tired, so he was going to lie down and rest until his little meal was served. Now, in this inn was an old man, and the old man said, if you're going to lie down, why not use my pillow? Now, pillows in ancient China weren't soft, bulky things. They were ceramic. It was like putting your head on a plate, but a plate shaped to your neck and your shoulders when you lay your head down on it. And this was a beautiful green glazed pillow, kind of a celadon glaze. So before he put his head down on the pillow, he had a brief conversation with the old man, who asked where he was going and mentioned it must be nice to be young and healthy. And the young man said he was indeed young and healthy, but he wasn't happy. He just worked all day in the fields and had nothing to show for it. Anyway, the old man gave him the pillow, and the young man put his head down and fell asleep. Next thing he knew, he was walking through a tunnel. He comes out the other end onto a road. Ooh, I found a typo in the book after endless passes. Hold on a second. I've got to make a note. Oh my God, we just agreed it was all done yesterday. Okay, typo, page 175. Okay. Thank you for listening. There we go. Okay. So, yeah. So, he is walking through a tunnel. He comes out the other end onto a road running through an open field. He sees mountains in the distance, waterfalls flowing, birds and horses and running deer, and tigers even in the distant mountains. And he starts walking down the road that runs through the field, and he comes to a village. And a beautiful girl comes running out of the biggest house and calls him by name. She says she's been waiting for him. So they get married, and soon he's running the estate for his wealthy father-in-law. He and his wife have children. In time, he's governor. When barbarians invade, he's called to lead the armies, and he achieves a great victory, driving the invaders before him, and he becomes prime minister. The land flourishes like never before. Great successes follow one after the other. Now, some of the other ministers become jealous and set up a plot, producing forged letters that seem to show he's been working with the barbarians to overthrow the empire. So he's banished. He loses everything. Great success becomes terrible failure. He's banished along with his wife and children to a little country place, a kind of hovel, where guards watch them day and night. He has no privacy. He has no peace. He has nothing. He realizes, have been happier as an unknown farmer than living like this. 8 years go by, and a rider suddenly arrives with a scroll from the emperor. The emperor has discovered the plot and asks for forgiveness. All the man's lands are restored. His sons are now old enough to help him rule. They become generals and ministers, and again the land flourishes under his care. In time, He becomes a very old man, and he's lying there dying. After all his successes, the final failure comes at last. The emperor has sent the best doctors in the world, but it's all hopeless. There's nothing to be done. Tears flow. The emperor, his sons, his daughters, his grandsons, his granddaughters, his sons-in-law and daughters-in-law, and his old wife are all crying. He leaves this world. He finds himself walking in a tunnel. He walks through and opens his eyes. He's lying in the inn with his head on the pillow, and his rice and tea are just being put down on the table. Hardly a moment has passed. In the Gateless Barrier, there is a koan in which Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, tries to awaken a young woman out of meditation. He tries and tries to no avail. He fails. Then a beginner Bodhisattva from 10,000 or so worlds below this one tries and is immediately successful. Part of the verse to the koan goes, a god mask, a devil mask. The failure is wonderful indeed. Thinking of reality itself, quantum theory suggests that each moment arises out of a field of endless potential and has in turn an endless range of possibility extending from it. But all those endless lines of quantum possibility springing out from each multi-fraction of a section collapse into the one line we know as reality. All those other possible lines, now unseen or unrealized in our world, are failures. Ordinary reality is itself the perfect expression of the failure that is wonderful indeed. Easy enough to say, but we all know failure personally. And is it wonderful indeed? Is there something precious about failure? There is a verse in Zen that has always meant a great deal to me. And it goes like this. When your bow is broken and your last arrow spent, then shoot. Shoot with your whole heart. When your bow is broken and your last arrow spent, then shoot. Shoot with your whole heart. We are bound, it seems, for failure. Or is it success? A final word. I don't want people thinking they should go out and fail at something and that this will somehow be good. If you do, you'll only be successes. Successes at failing. Successful at failing. Failure comes as you try to succeed. You don't have to make a special effort. It happens quite naturally. So just forget all of this. In fact, don't fail to do so. So that's the little piece on failure. And actually some of the details of this are gone into in the conversation in the book on the koan of the young woman and Manjushri. So I didn't redo those details in looking at this old talk, but it touches some of the same points and makes them a little more generalized. So now the final chapter is only a few pages long, and it's from a piece that, a think piece really, that initially appeared in 2010 at the website Sweet Cake Enso, which was created to accompany a traveling exhibit of Zen art, which was then touring American Zen centers. It's called Painting of a Rice Cake, Creative Imagination and the Way of the Bodhisattva. And this too touches points that are gone into in more detail in the book itself, but it's a kind of summation of a certain attitude. Begins with a quote from Zen Master Dogen's Gabyo section of the Shobogenzo, which means painting of a rice cake. And this is Gary Snyder's translation of it from Mountains and Rivers Without End. If you say a painting is not real, then the material phenomenal world is not real. Unsurpassed enlightenment is a painting. The entire phenomenal universe and the empty sky are nothing but a painting. Since this is so, there is no remedy for satisfying hunger other than a painted rice cake. Without painted hunger, you never become a true person. Without painted hunger, you never become a true person. And a quote from Robert Aitken Roshi, when the Dharma is internalized, it is most naturally taught in the form of folk stories, the Jataka tales in classical Buddhism, the koans in Zen, both of which appear in this new book. So, painted rice cakes, it said, can't satisfy hunger. How could they? It would be like reading a menu and expecting that to nourish us. This is how one traditional Zen view puts it. To be satisfied, we're told, we have to sit down and eat. To satisfy our real existential hunger, we have to sit down and actually practice. We've got to eat a real meal, bite into, chew, and swallow a real rice cake. But Dogen brilliantly states there is no remedy for satisfying our hunger other than a painted rice cake. No remedy for satisfying our deep hunger other than a painted rice cake? A painted rice cake is going to do the job, is actually the only thing that can? So is it that without illusion, imagination, dreams, we can't be whole, can't fulfill the potential of our realization of this very moment, without stories of previous exertions, without temples, teachers, tankas, painted and carved Buddhas, altars, centers, Shakespeare's, Zendos, Beethoven, Blake, Gandhi, Dogen, Mary Oliver, Gary Snyder, Martin Luther King, Tarzan, Ryokan, Rembrandt, Rothko, Hakuin, Hamlet, Gandalf, Frodo, mothers, fathers. Who would we be? How would we proceed? Dogen goes on to say in this section titled Gabyo of his Shobogenzo that the idea of ourselves as either unenlightened or enlightened is itself a painting built of the 5 skandhas. Likewise, the rooted idea of self and other is such a painting. Buddhas themselves are paintings created with clay shrines, a blade of grass, limitless aspiration, the 32 marks, and countless kalpas of assiduous practice. If you want to paint a picture of a Buddha, Dogen says you paint it with countless kalpas of assiduous practice. That's how you paint a picture of a Buddha. If this is so, then what kind of truth would we seek? What kind of truth could we actualize that is not a painting? How would we become whole, that is, be satisfied without the painting of a rice cake? For it is out of the imagination that we create our real lives. Athletes know this better than scholars. If you want to swim better, visualize yourself in the pool, water flowing smoothly past, the chiming, churning sound of that flow, the kick of your legs, the perfect, effortless stroke. What happens in the imagination affects us, even makes us who we are. As Yeats says, in dreams begin responsibilities. So stories, paintings, art itself is a tool that our ancestors worldwide passed down to us, an impressive technology, if you will, to refine the inner life, to improve our dreaming, to paint a picture. This goes against the grain of a certain contemporary view that Buddhism, especially Zen, is not about dreams and imaginings, but rather about reality and truth. The salvation Buddhist practice offers is, in this view, freedom from all such old-timey fluff. I have even encountered some Zen practitioners who hold that imagination is the furthest thing from Buddhism and indeed useless to its practice. But we could just as well assert the opposite, that Buddhism, Zen included, is a great engine of wish and dream. In fact, the Bodhisattva ideal, the core of Mahayana Buddhism, of which Zen is one aspect, might be said to depend almost entirely upon the power of imagination itself. The vow to save all beings, one must not simply imagine, but one must imagine bravely, totally, immensely, deeply. Why commit oneself to a small dream, tediously emptying a vast ocean by the spoonful, when a great dream can encompass everything, even truth itself, and swallow up the entire universe in a single gulp? Of course, imagination, like myth, can for us today summon quite opposing connotations. The popular meaning of myth, like imagination, is that it is something false. But myth can also mean something so true, it cannot be put into one final linguistic or imagistic form. It underlies all forms. It is a story truer than words can say. As for imagination, it need not mean fantasy, reflection, daydreams, thoughts, insights, or the stream of internal vision and thought, where we are isolated, withdrawn, and separated from whatever is right before us. That teacup, that bug, that damned leaky faucet. It can just as authentically mean imagination with a capital I, in the sense of infinite, creative potential, the realm we might enter in Zazen when body and mind fall away. Emptiness that is neither static nor dull, but free, empty of all limitations. That is a realm of infinitely creative potential. The realm out of which we dream/create our own unique, daily, never to be repeated, moment by moment, breath by breath, thought form by thought form lives. It is where the highest we can imagine is the same as what is, the state one might experience in watching the night dances at Zuni Pueblo, where plants, birds, thoughts, galaxies, and stars enter the plaza as living, dancing beings. There is a dream dreaming us, is a Bushman saying, pointing to this realm. It is the empty realm of reality. Blake says the imagination is not a state, it is the human existence itself. And what is that? It is simply to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. And that's from Auguries of Innocence by Blake. So what we usually term reality is, as it turns out, simply another dream, an imagining, and a somewhat limited one at that. In the end, reality and imagination, mind and stories cannot be separated. Painted cakes do feed our hunger. Not only are they not two, they are not even one. And this is the quote from Hee Jin Kim in the book Ehe Dogen, Mystical Realist. He says, in other words, myth is reality and reality myth. Dogen did not believe in a dualism between reality and myth. Rather, his purpose was to clarify and reinforce myth, that is Buddha nature, in order to see and touch reality as it was. So again, in other words, myth is reality and reality myth. Dogen did not believe in a dualism between reality and myth. Rather, his purport was to clarify, purify, and reinforce myth, that is Buddha nature, in order to see and touch reality as it was. Again, to repeat Dogen, if you say the painting is not real, then the material phenomenal world is not real. Unsurpassed enlightenment is a painting. The entire phenomenal universe and the empty sky are nothing but a painting. Since this is so, there is no remedy for satisfying hunger other than a painted rice cake. Without painted hunger, you never become a true person. Without painted hunger, you never become a true person. One of the central koans of the Venerable Gateless Gate, Mumonkan, collection of koans and commentaries by the early 13th century Chinese Zen master Wu Men, is its second case, Bai Chong's Fox. The case essentially is a folktale about karma and essential nature in which a head priest is reborn 500 times as a fox. Wu Men's pithy comment on the case ends, if you have the eye to see through this, you will appreciate how the former head of the monastery enjoyed his 500 happy, blessed lives as a fox. If you have the eye to see through this, you will appreciate how the former head of the monastery enjoyed his 500 happy, blessed lives as a fox. Here, Wu Men might be making a sly reference to Jataka tales, stories of the Buddha's former births, often in animal form. In the Jataka tradition, the Buddha himself lives essentially 500 past lives before stepping forward and making his final total effort to embody the way, thereby becoming Shakyamuni, the Buddha of our own historic period. Wu Men's reference touches an interesting and classic point. Were any of those 500 previous lives any less Buddha? The Zen question here is, are any of our lives now any less Buddha than when we become full Buddhas like Shakyamuni Buddha? Is it any less right now as you live your 500 happy, blessed lives as a fox, as a tree, as a teacup, as a doorbell, as you yourself? The voice of a deeply imaginative Zen runs like quicksilver through the koans, turning back and forth on fundamental points of karma and essential nature. And behind that lie pointers to the Buddha's past lives as brought to life through the Dharma folklore of the Jatakas, little paintings, snapshots of moments on the way, all part of the traditional context of Buddhist practice and aspiration. They show the Buddha painting his own picture of Buddha, an enso, that is, a Zen circle portrait with the brush and ink of countless kalpas of sustained and dedicated practice. That's how you paint a picture, a real picture of a Buddha, through countless kalpas of sustained, unflagging, fully dedicated practice, which is a degree of effort. So that's where we'll stop for today. We'll recite our great vows for all, our Bodhisattva vows. And thank you very much for allowing me to put that out there publicly and find yet one more typo in the vast field of typos. Maybe I should leave it just, for kind of good luck. that may be for, yeah.
Just to show you're human.
Just to show I'm human, says Rose. Okay, we'll stop here. I will turn off the recording and we'll recite our great vows for all.